Cheers, cheers to... You kind of look lost, but I think we might have just found you. Can never say that with a straight face. This is the lost and found intro, and you know what that means. You might do, but then if you're new here and you don't, that means it's last meals time. And this bitch didn't want to eat anything, she just wanted to drink coffee. Which I think I can stand by, but then again, I don't think I would take coffee as my last meal. Just because, you know, everything intensifies, you still have it like a few hours before the actual execution. I love how I'm hypothetically talking like I'm gonna commit crime and end up on that death row. Suddenly reevaluating all of my mistakes. In terms of coffee, it intensifies all of your senses. Do you want to take coffee before execution? I mean, I'm not judging or anything. This is like the smallest mistake that the woman we're talking about today has made. So who are we talking on about today? She has been dubbed the first female serial killer. In the meantime, Elizabeth Bathory and Lavinia Fisher were like, am I a joke to you? Like, sorry, but this bitch is taking this title. We've been doing this since the 1800s. This one is gonna take the title. Shut. They're out there turning in their freaking graves being like, not today. The video. If you didn't get that reference, Eileen is definitely not the first serial killer. She killed in like 1999, okay? Way too late for her to be the first serial killer. Why I think the media dubbed her that is, I think like before her, you would either have black widows, so the women who would just be like out there like housewives, like doing their chores, and then just in the meantime poisoning every single meal for their husbands, and then just, you know, claiming their insurance and shit. Or there would be angels of death, so like usually nurses, you know, you think like, oh, it's a sexy nurse, and she's still like fucking killing you. Out of different reasons. Angels of death are really interesting, as in, it can be mercy, it can be just because they can, it can be that they get off on it and they just have sex next to the corpses. Now that that's clarified, let's dive into the story. But first, what can we tell about Eileen just from the last meal that she has had? By meal, I mean she didn't even eat. So in terms of last meals, you can reject your last meal and you can just choose to have coffee or choose to have nothing. Or choose not to spend any money and have just the last meal that you would have in prison for that day. That's called pulling a Bundy. But yeah, so just coffee, huh? Was she bland? Was she bland? She was definitely not bland, but then again, exactly that. There's nothing deep to her. Now again, considering all my fucking mistakes and everything I have done in my life, because coffee is life. But yeah, there's nothing deep to Eileen. A lot of controversial opinion. But yeah, let's dive into the motherfucking bitch's life. So Eileen was born as the second child of the family on February 29th, 1956. This is a blanket, by the way, but yeah, it's not a fashion choice. Love when the caffeine hits. It's just like, this is gonna be a wonderful time. We're gonna have a trip. Okay, her childhood, blissful childhood, best childhood we have ever heard of. Of course not. This is one of the most disturbing childhoods like ever. So her parents separated before she was even born. And her dad spent time in prison during her childhood he was in prison for child molestation. So he kills himself in prison because he's a child molester. You know the treatment that those kind of prisoners get in prison. Meanwhile, her mother can't deal with her or Keith, her brother, so she abandons them. So they move to live to their grandparents. This is by the age of 4. So by the age of 4, like the dad abandoned them, then the dad killed himself in prison. Mom abandoned them. Huge abandonment issues, straight up, even like she's not even 4 yet. Now she moves to the grandparents, and if this had been like a wonderful childhood, you know, if her grandparents turned out to be great people, this might have been a different story. But no, grandfather, piece of shit, very abusive, super violent, grandmother, alcoholic. Grandfather was not just physically abusive, he was also sexually abusing her as well. It's also speculated that she had sexual relations with Keith, her brother, but that has never been confirmed. What has kind of been confirmed, because it resulted in a teen pregnancy when she was only 14, is that her grandfather would basically sell her out to his friends, or like he would bring his friends over and she would sleep with them. So she ends up pregnant at the age of 14. Now is when she spends some time at the home for like the unwed mothers. She gives the child to adoption, and this is when she turns to prostitution. Well, slight correction there. She didn't just voluntarily turn to prostitution. The grandparents kicked her out since she became pregnant because, you know, it's her fault that she got pregnant. As you know, it's her fault that she got pregnant. It's not the fault of the people that have been looking after her and sexually abusing her and sharing her with friends. So like she got pregnant by some of them. I mean, for all accounts, it could have been her grandfather's child. Speculation, never confirmed, not a fact, okay? So Eileen is living in the woods, and of course, to provide for herself, she started robbing places, robbing people, you know, hitchhiking, then robbing them, which would eventually escalate. But in 1974, there has been like a turn of events that could have resulted in something great, positive, her turning her life around. So in 1974, she is already getting caught for theft. So she has been charged for like driving while drunken and disorderly, and for firing a gun from a moving vehicle. Like, cool. She serves like a bit of time, now gets out on probation, and in 70s she decides to settle in Florida. Settling again meaning she's living outside, like she's living in the woods, living in different homes. This is, however, where she meets a rich yachtsman, like while she's in Florida, you know, by the beach, chilling. This is, however, where she meets a wealthy yachtsman, Louis Fall. And by that point, she's in her 20s. By this point, she's still young, like she has been drinking, you know, drinking, doing drugs, living on the outside, living rough, but she still had the looks. So the two of them quickly get married, but also the marriage quickly gets annulled because Louis reports her. So her maladjusted life and everything reflects in this marriage. He takes a restraining order against her because of her violent outbursts. He was actually scared for his life due to this. And soon after that, she is again left on the streets, and she again turns to robbery and petty crimes. Now, as if she needed another trigger, her brother dies in 1976, but he leaves her a 10,000 life insurance policy, which of course she doesn't use to get her life together. She had like a fine for disorderly driving, and she used the money to like pay that fine, which like the fine was like $100. And then she just splashed it on like a luxury new car, which again she would wreck afterwards because she was not mentally okay. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to justify Eileen at any point in this story, but like she never had role models. She never understood like that she could go seek mental health help, that like she could go get herself into therapy, that she could maybe improve her life. So when somebody gives you 10,000 pounds to you today, you might invest them better. She was just like, yeah, instead of sleeping in a forest, I'm going to sleep in a car. So let's get a car. That might serve me for something. This is why later in the story as well, a lot of people will consider her a victim and like would victimize her a lot. And I feel like the background of the story helps you to get the perspective of who she is, and like that she could have maybe never been a functioning human being. But then again, there have been, Keith hasn't had a criminal record, like there have been people probably in her family that didn't commit these crimes because we never heard about them. So doesn't really justify, just kind of explains like she isn't really capable of making like rational decisions because she never knew what rational decisions were. About a decade later, so now we're in the 80s, Eileen meets Taria Moore in Florida, and I'll refer to her as Ty throughout the rest of the video just because everybody else does. So they start a relationship, and this is when she kind of feels completely comfortable with what she's doing. You know, she's been in and out of prison, she's been doing petty thefts now for over a decade, so she's like, escalation time, right? Moore is going to end up being super important because they kind of tied her with Eileen even in the 80s, even before her crime spree. So, July 4th, 1987, the two of them used to go to bars and drink. This is how they met, like they were just really into boozing. So July 4th, 1987, they tie both of them to this bar in Daytona in Florida and accuse Eileen of the assault and battery with a beer bottle. Then the next year again, the two of them are located again in Daytona Beach in March 1988. Moore is listed as a witness to an incident where Eileen claimed that a bus driver pushed her off the bus because of confrontation. This will, by the way, become a pattern. Not that Moore is a witness, although that too, but the fact that Eileen is just like, I am a victim, I'm so victimized in every single situation, please believe me, he pushed me off the bus for no fucking reason, he does it every day. I mentioned these two incidents just because they're kind of like a prequel, also to explain what the police was thinking after she went on this killing spree and how they actually tied it back to her after that. But now let's go into the main body of the story and her killing 7 men within the space of a year. So between 1989 and 1990 she has killed 7 men. Let's break it down and speak of how the police was trying to piece the bits and pieces together. Maybe her most controversial kill, and the one that she has heavily used to her self-defense story, is the kill that she has done in November 1989 of Richard Mallory. He was the electronics store owner and his body was found again abandoned in the woods. And he had 2 bullets to his lung. So the police first found an abandoned car, and then miles away in the woods they found his body. After being convicted for this murder, so after they placed every single murder and allocated it and connected it to her, she has said that Richard has brought her to this area and she has been sodomized, and apparently this was a famous area for sexual requests, so for prostitution, sex work. This will eventually work towards her victim defense, well, somewhat, because she still ended up on the death row, didn't she? But yeah, this will sort of work, for fuck's sake, so much here. This will work towards her supporters to see her as the victim of the crime just because of the area where Richard Mallory has been found. Now, David Spears, her second victim, was reported missing in May 1990. He has been divorced, and this is when the pieces of the puzzle are gonna sort of start to fit together. You know, when you make the puzzle and you just have the outline, you're like, oh, okay. Basically, this is when they knew that the person they're looking for is a woman, because it's 1990 by this point, it's not 70s, hitchhiking is not as popular as it was before. So this is when they were like, yeah, it's definitely a woman, and definitely knows the area. Because also with David we have the most information, just because Eileen kind of seems to have went out of her way to place this to look like she was the victim of the crime and to stage it. So David has been found without his clothes, but he had a cap on. Also, there was a condom on the scene, so again, if you were to actually victimize somebody, would you bother to even put a condom on? Or even just how would you have undressed yourself and then had put a cap on? So this has definitely been a staged kind of scene that the police has found. He was found alongside the US Route 19. He has been shot 6 times in the chest by a .22 caliber pistol. Now, the pistol information was never as relevant, as in shooting the guy was always her MO, but she will change the calibers of the pistol. So with the next victim, Charles Carskadon, he was found in the Pasco County, and here she used a .20 caliber pistol. So this one was tied to her because she has pawned it from a pawnbroker shop. Charles was a part-time rodeo worker, and this is the one where they were kind of thinking there is some premeditation here, you know. So if you are thinking of okay, piecing a puzzle, kind of going inwards, you're like, okay, there's a little more details with each and every one of these murders. So here, she wrapped Charles into an electric blanket, and they were like, who the fuck just has an electric blanket on head? Who the hell has the electric blanket on hand? If it's not somebody who is a drifter, who's maybe sleeping in a car, sleeping outside, sleeping in the forest, it's not something that you just have handy, you know, in the back of your car. So we're definitely looking for a female drifter. MO is shooting, kind of escalating into overkill, so they're piecing these pieces together. Also, they could tie her to the car that belonged to Charles, so they could also tie her to the victim's vehicles, and in this particular case to his car. Her next victim was again found in July 1990, and his name was Peter Sims. They could tie her to her next victim, Peter Sims, just because of her fingerprint, on the inside handle of his car. Because again, when she ditches the body, she takes the car. But this is the one she has never been charged for, because they never managed to actually find Peter's body. Her next victim was Burress. He was a 50-year-old sausage salesman. He has been found in Marion County and was shot twice, again to the chest. Now, her second to last victim was a cop, and this is heavily speculated that this one in particular was an overkill, because he used to be chief of police, or because he probably either has said that he was a cop or she has figured it out during the ride. So with Charles Humphreys, his body was found again, similar area, Marion County, in September 1990. But he was found clothed, so she didn't even want to play the victim card, she didn't even want to stage this. She shot him 5 times in the torso and then one final shot to his head. This is super fucking heavy, like... This is so heavy because usually with these cases you kind of have a victim, you have like some background on them. Here with serial killers, and especially with Eileen, it's just so methodical. It's just like a list for her that she has just gone through, and she's like followed these sets of rules. Complete disregard to anything, like she's even getting sloppy, she doesn't even care. And the last victim that I managed to connect her to was Walter Antonio. He was a trucker and a security guard, and he was found in Dixie County. He has been shot again 4 times to the chest, and they found his car, and this is how they finally put these pieces together. They found his car abandoned again, and it had Eileen's DNA. So now the police had fingerprints to at least tie her to a couple. They could link her to missing vehicles, so they could link her to missing men, but they still kind of knew that because Eileen was actually using aliases at that point, they knew that this was gonna be hard, that they need something concrete. So they were like, hey, remember Eileen? Remember who back in, a couple of years ago when she still wasn't on this murderous spree? Remember who she was with? Yeah, remember that bus driver witness? Remember the beer bottle girl? Yeah, she was weird, but she was with somebody, right? Let's get to her girlfriend, because we kind of need a witness testimony here. Because otherwise they would have just, a couple of fingerprints, sort of like an MO, but they need something like for a tight, closed case, because otherwise Aileen is just gonna continue. She ain't planning to stop anytime soon. So they get to Ty, and in mid-January 1991, Ty agrees, like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna take the phone confession out of her, just, I'm not getting any prison time now, right? I'm not getting no jail time. They're like, yeah, sure, whatever, just get us this bitch. So she does. And it's really during the sentencing, during the trial, and in the aftermath when you can really deep dive into Eileen's brain. And trust me, I did not want to deep dive into Eileen's brain. God, this is mental. So of course, her defense is it's self-defense. Every single person has attacked her ever in her life. Here really the prosecution was like, well, we only have like one clear-cut case, so let's get her for that, and we are aiming for death penalty. So this is the case of Mallory. And then the defense was like, well, great, this is gonna be easy because Mallory has served in prison for this exact crime, so let's play the self-defense. Her psychiatrist testified that she had a borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and also during her trial she had a ton of supporters. Like, hey, Aileen has been standing up for the victims of sexual assault this whole time. Why we convicted this girl? She has been a victim during this whole cases. But the jury kind of saw through all of that, and they convicted her to death penalty. Like, they took only 4 days to reach the death penalty verdict. So in January 1992, they found her guilty for the murder of Mallory. Now she goes to prison. In prison, something ensues in her brain. Something happens in her brain. She's like, I'm going to confess to every other murder, She was probably thinking like, I'm gonna get the death penalty anyways. It's not like they can harden my sentence. It's not like they can make it any worse. So she confesses to every single other murder as well. She has also said, because then she was brought to the court again for them to give her a death penalty for every single other murder that she has confessed to. So, she has said to the court, I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently rape me, as I've told you, but the others did not. They only began to start to. So then on May 1992, she was given 3 more death sentences. During the next couple of months, she fired her defense lawyers, and she was like, she wanted to own up to it and to say like, yeah, I killed these men in cold blood. I killed these men, robbed them as cold as ice, and I'll do it again too. There's no chance of keeping me alive or anything because I'd kill again. I have hate crawling through my system. I'm so sick of hearing that she's crazy stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again. So her attorneys are there like, she's not mentally competent, she doesn't know what she's saying. Wuornos is like, I'm competent, I would kill again. Yeah, you try to release me, you try not to murder me. After she was sent to death row, she was protesting heavily against her being like sent to life sentence or anything. She was like, no, I want to die. She's been sitting on death row for a while, so in 2002 the governor at the time actually lifted her death row penalty because, as you know, like the documentaries have been made about her, so like she has given interviews and stuff, and she was pissed that this death row has been lifted. She was like, I want to die, like I've been telling you I want to die, I deserve death. She said to the interviewer, you sabotaged my ass, society and the cops and the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies and shit. Her final on-camera words were, thanks a lot society for railroading my ass. So even in prison, she would be food poisoning, she would try to appear insane, she would try to like hurt others and hurt herself, just to like again make sure that this lift is abandoned and that she gets the death penalty. On October the 9th, 2002, she was executed by lethal injection. So October the 9th, she chooses just a cup of coffee as her last meal, and she rejects the normal last meal. She had a budget of like $20. She's like, nah, don't want that. Fuck that, I just want to die. What do you not understand? She was executed by lethal injection and her body was cremated and buried in her town of Burress. Her last words. I just like to say I'm sailing with a rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June the 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back. That's, just the words. Like that's one statement I don't want to hear from a death row inmate, that you're just about to lethally inject, as the person injecting me in particular is like, I'll be back. I'm like, and please don't hold me at night. That would be nice, please don't hold me. Her last requests to friends and family were equally strange. That's the best way to describe it. So she wanted her ashes to be spilled, like, what is the word, man? So she requested her ashes to be spread under a tree in her birth town of Michigan, just next to her childhood friend. She also requested Natalie's Merchant song Carnival to be played at her funeral. Now, as I'm dumb, I don't actually understand how cremated people have funerals. I know, so dumb. So, is the funeral considered to be the spreading of the ashes, or or do they have like something separate once you cremate the body? Yeah, let me know in the comments. So dumb. Didn't look that up. But yeah, I listened to the song and it explains a couple of things. It's actually a decent song. I was like, wow. Also, it's one of her most played songs on Spotify. I guess it's because of that, because of people knowing the shit. Or maybe it's just a fucking famous song, okay, and I'm not aware. Don't fucking come for me. And yeah, that kind of summarizes the case of Aileen Wuornos. I hate that we don't have the background info on any of these victims, as in we don't know much details, you know. It's not like a classic murder case where you have details on the victim as much as you have on the killer. No. And it's also because it's all kind of like, oh yeah, it all happened within a year, so we're just gonna treat them as numbers. I hate that. Also, I always try to think of motivation, like of motives in these cases. I think I've seen enough of like Criminal Minds and shows like this to understand that she has just hated men. And she just killed all of these men as like this overkill because the one person that she actually wanted to kill was already dead, and that was her grandfather. But yeah, I mean, I could be bullshitting out of my fucking brain. I might not know the answers to everything, okay? I'm just Hermione Granger in this room, but yeah, if anybody actually, if you want to speculate to the answers, leave the comments below, or if you're actually a licensed like psychologist, psychiatrist, and actually want to tell me that no, that is not the motive at all, then yeah, feel free to drop that below as well. But yeah, this case was a bummer. I don't know why I always do them at like 10 AM and then bum myself out for the rest of the day. I should probably change that. I should also probably stop covering people that had caffeine as their last meals, and then I can do them at night and be like, yeah, last thing before sleep. Is there ever a good time of day to cover somebody like Aileen Wuornos? But yeah, that's it. Subscribe if you like this kind of content. Like, if you like this kind of content, you know the drill. It's not your first YouTube rodeo, okay? Yeah, starting to make fucking references to rodeo, great. Yeah, so I have nothing else to tell you and nothing else to say, so until next Friday, bye!